In the shadow of the Eildon Hill lies a historic Scottish town. This is Melrose, home to one of Scotland's most impressive medieval abbeys, its ruined walls telling stories of warrior kings, vampires and monastic majesty. Come on a wee trip with me and Molly to learn more about Melrose and discover a few local legends along the way. If you enjoy stories of history, folklore and legend from around Scotland, remember to like this video and give me a follow.
Well, good morning everybody. Molly and I are off to take you somewhere in Scotland today that doesn't nearly get enough attention. We're heading down to the Scottish borders. More specifically, we're going to go around the Four Borders Abbeys, and hopefully this is going to show you why it is just as worth heading south as it is to head north in Scotland. Molly's looking very eager.
You can find Melrose about an hour south of Edinburgh, and I quickly realised while filming this that I was not going to get round all four abbeys in one day, although that is possible if you're short on time. So this is going to be part one of a wee series. Anyway, here we are in Melrose, and the ruins of this majestic abbey dominate the surrounding town. Like the others, the abbey is managed by Historic Scotland, and while parts are closed off for conservation work right now, that is reflected in a reduced entry fee. Now, it's a beautiful place, packed with history, and you just need a little bit of imagination to kind of squint and see it all coming back to life.
Now, for centuries, this was a frontier land. And the people of the borders, they suffered every time Scotland and England went to war. It was also those people that did most of the fighting, so they were pretty tough. But it also makes it surprising that there are four luxurious, very rich, very vulnerable abbeys in this place full of warfare. It's mostly thanks to one man, King David I, who ruled around the mid-1100s. Now, Melrose was originally built in the 1130s on the orders of King David. There's lots of interesting characters buried here in Melrose. There's King Alexander II somewhere, we don't know exactly where. There's also a few of the Earls of Douglas buried here, and somebody, a notorious wizard called Michael Scott. No, not the guy from The Office. This person was so infamous he was named in Dante's Inferno, and it's said that he was killed here when a stone fell from the roof of the abbey and hit him on the head. He was buried somewhere with his magic books. And as you can see, there's lots of scaffolding and fences and things up around Melrose Abbey just now. It's not always like this, but maybe they're worried about somebody having the same fate as poor old Michael Scott.
There's also one of the more interesting gargoyles you might find. That, up there, yes, that's a bagpipe playing pig.
I'm looking at what would have been the cloister, so perfect time to tell you more about the abbey itself and the monks that lived here and made it what it was. Made it such an incredibly rich and powerful place. They were Cistercians. Cistercians were people who thought the Benedictines were just a little bit too lax, I guess, a bit too casual, so they were far stricter. They lived in strict poverty and prayer, although they still managed to make this place pretty much the centre of the European wool trade. That was why Melrose did so well, and it's still around here, around the hills, around the borders, Melrose. Lots and lots of sheep farming, lots and lots of lambs. In fact, I saw some lambs. It is the end of January right now, and I saw lambs earlier, which is very surprising. Now, there would have been around about 100, up to 100, shall I say. I think at its peak, at its the highest power, there were 100 monks here at Melrose Abbey. I'd say from the ruins that we have left, there's Molly, from the ruins that we have left, it can be quite difficult really to imagine the scale, how grand Melrose Abbey really was at the height of its power. I mean, it was enormous, it was immense, stretched across, through that wall, across the road there, but I will take you shortly. But if you imagine most people living back then, unless they were fairly high and mighty, you know, they would have lived in small, essentially would be huts, and then they came and saw something like this, it would have blown their tiny minds. Now, one of the stranger stories from Melrose is that as well as all those famous people buried here, there was also once a vampire priest. Well, I say vampire priest. I'll let you decide once you hear the story. This priest, instead of tending his flock, he spent far more time indulging his sins, riding around the countryside with his hounds hunting. Now, doesn't sound very priest-like. He did have one very wealthy lady who he was a chaplain for. So, when he died, with her influence, he was buried here, somewhere in Melrose Abbey grounds. The problem was that he didn't stay dead. The stories began that this priest, who became known as the Hundepriest, or the priest of the hounds, he would rise from his grave at night and he would terrorise the monks in the abbey. Now, luckily for them, they prayed so hard that he couldn't get in. But that just meant that he went off into the lands around Melrose and caused havoc there instead, especially at that lady that he was a chaplain for. That lovely old lady, wealthy woman, who made sure he got buried somewhere as nice as this. He would scratch at her door, he would groan and moan outside, he would float above her bedchamber, all this kind of stuff. Now, she was influential enough that she came to the abbey and said to them, "You have to do something about this Hundepriest. We can't have ghosts or zombies or vampires or whatever he is hassling me when I'm trying to sleep." So, 4 monks, sometimes it said it's the abbot and 3 monks, decided they were going to deal with the Hundepriest. They waited one night, they waited guard around his grave, and the hours passed and darkness fell, and nothing was stirring, not even a mouse. So, eventually, 3 of them decided, this is enough, the 3 monks, we're going inside, we're going to go get warmed up, but not the abbot, not the head monk. He stood there, stood guard, watching and waiting, and typical, as soon as the other 3 disappear, that is when the Hundepriest decided to strike. He rose from his grave and he attacked the abbot. He roared at him. This abbot was braver than he looked, though. He lifted up his axe and he whacked it straight into the Hundepriest, cutting a great big bloody wound. Now, the commotion of all this going on outside, the other 3 monks ran out to help, and together they forced the Hundepriest back into his grave, and it said that it covered itself up as if nothing had ever happened, nothing had stirred. Now, the 4 of them stayed guard until the morning, and when the bright light of day had come, they dug up this monster, they dragged him out of the abbey grounds, and they burned him to ash, so that he would never rise again, never attack anybody. So, this vampire monk, as he gets called, is gone for good. Hopefully. Now, by King David building these abbeys in the borders, incredibly wealthy places in what was really a vulnerable place, it was a statement. It was him saying, "Look how powerful I am. Nobody would dare to harm my borders abbeys. Nobody would dare to attack me. England wouldn't invade." And he was right. He had a great relationship with the King of England. The problem was that didn't really go down the line. Future kings of Scots had the problem of invading armies, especially during the Wars of Independence. The abbeys were regularly burnt. Most of what we see today was actually from the late 1300s, but it was also burnt down 3 or 4 times in the 1400s. And then the early 1500s, with the War of the Rough Wooing, as it gets called, when Mary Queen of Scots was a child, Melrose Abbey and the other Borders Abbeys were a prime target for Henry VIII's armies. He came to try and teach the Scots a lesson and force them to marry Mary Queen of Scots to his son Edward and join the 2 royal households in the British Isles. So Melrose Abbey, as well as the other abbeys, were burned down several times, but they were always rebuilt, often slightly bigger and better than before, because they were such wealthy places. The final nail in the coffin was the Scottish Reformation, when people like John Knox, the father of the Church of Scotland, decided to throw off the Catholic Church and become Protestant. And it meant that we didn't need abbeys anymore. Eventually, they just fell into ruin. And, most of the stone from places like this will be built into the town of Melrose around somewhere. Lots of not fresh, but well-cut stone. The lead from the roof was taken away and they just crumbled. The fact that there's anything left at all, quite substantial really, is amazing. Who knows? There could be a 600-year-old jobby at the bottom of that somewhere. It's a good Scots word. If you don't know what it is, Google it. Now, I would say the most famous thing about Melrose Abbey, by far, is the fact that this is the resting spot for the heart of Robert the Bruce, and this is where it's said to lay. Now, the story goes that Robert the Bruce always wanted to go on crusade. He was probably trying to make up for the fact that on his way to take the throne, he just happened to kill his closest rival to the throne, John Comyn, in Greyfriars Monastery in Dumfries. So it makes sense he would want to make up for that. Well, the problem was that he spent his entire reign fighting to solidify Scotland's independence. And it was only in 1328 that with the Treaty of, I think it was Edinburgh Northampton off the top of my head, that was finally done. That England finally acknowledged he was the rightful King of Scots and Scotland was an independent country, as it had always been. Bruce then dies in 1329. He wasn't very well for most of his life, which makes it even more remarkable the things that he did. But it meant he was never able to go on crusade to fight against God's enemies as he saw it. So on his deathbed, he asked his right-hand man, James Douglas, the Black Douglas or the good Sir James Douglas, however you choose to call him. He asked him to take his heart, preferably to the Holy Land. Sorry, Molly's tying me up. But if not, just against God's enemies. So his heart was put in a casket in lead and then put in a silver casket, hung round James Douglas's neck, and he took it with him to southern Spain because that was the closest they were going to get. There wasn't really many crusades going on back then, but King Alfonso was fighting the Moors. Now at the Battle of Taba, James Douglas dies, and it says that before he dies, he picked up Bruce's heart at the casket, not his bare heart, picked up the casket, threw it at the enemy and roared out, "Lead on, Braveheart, Douglas will follow thee." That's where Braveheart comes from. And as such, he then charges into the enemy to his death. Now, Bruce's heart was returned and buried here at Melrose, underneath where this stone is now. Now, we lost where that was for centuries. Bruce's body is at Dunfermline Abbey. That was also lost and found in the early 1800s. Now, it wasn't until much more recently that this heart here was dug up. There was a casket found. When the archaeologists opened it, they found a little note to say that it had been found almost 100 years earlier, and inside was a heart. They checked it. Right enough, it's a heart. It's been carbon dated to the right time. There's nothing to suggest that it's not Robert the Bruce's heart. So, we're claiming it. We're saying it is, and it's here. Pay your respects, Molly. Now, I'm sorry that I can't show you more of inside of Melrose Abbey at the moment while it's all under this scaffolding. I'll return as soon as that's sorted. But anyway, there's more for me to show you, so let's carry on. This is the Commendator's house. The Commendator was the person who basically ran the abbey lands and things after the monastic life was over. And today, inside, it's a little museum with some of the carving, some of the more vulnerable things from the abbey taken down. Unfortunately, no dogs allowed inside. So, you'll just have to go in and see it for yourself, because Molly is not somebody who likes being tied up. She's needy enough when I've actually got hold of her. Never mind when I don't.
Time to leave Melrose Abbey behind, but don't worry, I've got a few more things to show you nearby. But first, coffee.
Can I get a flat white, please?
And a treat for Molly, obviously.
There you go.
Well, Melrose is a pretty beautiful little market town, dominated by the Abbey, right in the middle, as you can see. But it's known for one thing other than the Abbey in particular. Anybody like sport? Now in 1883, Melrose Rugby Club, like lots of others, was looking for a way to raise some funds, make some money, when a local butcher, Ned Haig, came up with the idea to hold a tournament of mini rugby games. So 7 players each, 7 minutes a half, full-size pitch. That means lots more running, lots more fitness, lots more tries, so it's very entertaining and you get lots of games in one day. Now, I'm a rugby player. Maybe I should say I used to be a rugby player, and Melrose is a very, very special place because of that. So the Melrose Sevens every May is still a huge, huge deal. The game has spread around the world. It's in the Olympics now, but still this is the home of rugby sevens. And every year it draws some really big names, some international teams to play here. It's on the telly, that's how big a deal it is. If you ever get a chance, I'd highly recommend going. It's like a festival spirit. But anyway, it's an integral part of Melrose. Rugby is a huge deal here and right across the borders. And I'd like to say I have won a sevens tournament here, although it was when I was, I think, maybe 15 or 16, so 20 years ago. I should probably stop talking about it. It's also just an absolutely beautiful place to play rugby with the Eildon Hills there in the background, and that is where we're going for our final story.
Let's go find a bit of local folklore.
Well, me and Molly have travelled, about 3 minutes from Melrose. This is just outside. We're in shadow of the Eildon Hill, or hills. There's 3 peaks, 1 hill. There's a story about that. It's not this story. This is where one of the famous Borders ballads, a great piece of local folklore, is said to have taken place. All to do with a guy, True Thomas, sometimes called Thomas of Ercildoune, but mostly he's known by the name Thomas the Rhymer, and we are going to Rhymer's Stone. It's just up ahead. This is the Rhymer's Stone, and it marks where the Eildon tree used to stand. It also marks where one of the greatest stories from the Borders folklore comes from. This is where Thomas the Rhymer was tricked by the Queen of the Fairies. He lay underneath the tree having a snooze when he woke up to this beautiful woman astride this big white horse. Now, he was amazed, and he said, "You must be the Queen of Heaven." And she said, "Close. I'm the Queen of the Fairies, and I've been looking for you, Thomas. All I want is for you to give me a kiss." Now, he was pretty happy with this arrangement, sprang to his feet and immediately kissed the beautiful woman, and he was under her spell. He was entranced. He was convinced to get back up onto the back of her horse, and he rode off towards the fairy kingdom. They came to a crossroads, and there was a beautiful, nice path with flowers on either side and, easy going. That was the path to hell. There was a thorny path, rocky and full of hardness along the way. That was the path to heaven, of course, but they took a third path, the one greener than any path Thomas had ever seen before. That was the path to the fairy kingdom. Before they could get there, they came to an orchard, and the Queen of the Fairies gave Thomas this fruit, this mysterious fruit, and said, "This is your reward for serving me for 7 years. It will grant you a tongue that cannot lie." Now, that doesn't sound like much of a reward to me, but all will be explained. Now, Thomas was told, you're going to have to wait a while before you can test that out, because whilst in the fairy kingdom, you cannot utter a single word, or you'll never be able to return to the mortal realm. And Thomas, now clad in green to fit in with all the fairies, settled in for 7 years of hard work, working for the Queen of the Fairies. But it seemed like just a few days had passed before she told him his debt was paid. Time passes differently down there in Scottish folklore. Thomas discovered that tongue that couldn't lie, now he was back, actually just meant that everything he said came true. Hey, Molly. He came out with dozens, if not hundreds, of prophecies, not just from the borders. There's lots of them up in places like Aberdeenshire as well. Thomas Rhymer became a name respected and probably feared because a lot of his prophecies were really more like curses. One of them relates to this spot right here. And there's a little stone just along the side there with a view, and it says, "At Eildon Tree, if you shall be a brig or tweed, there you may see." The River Tweed is right in a big dip there, big hollow. It's pretty much impossible to see from here. People thought it was ridiculous that Thomas would come out with such a prophecy that you would ever see a bridge built over the Tweed, until centuries later, and the Leatherfoot Viaduct was built. And this thing's huge. That you can see just from the spot of the Eildon Tree. It just goes to show that Thomas Rhymer's prophecies, even after hundreds of years, they're still coming true. Well, I hope you enjoyed that wee tour around Melrose Abbey and the surrounding area, and that you'll join us for the next one. Next episode, I guess, is going to be Dryborough Abbey, just along the road from Melrose, not very far at all. If you enjoyed it, hope you like the video, leave me a comment, share it with your friends, and hopefully you'll subscribe to make sure you don't miss any more. But anyway, from Molly and I, until the next time, hopefully I'll see you then.